So over here, I've opened an OTT platform called Disney Plus Hotstar. And if I go on over here and click on login, it's gonna ask us our mobile number to log in. So let me just enter some random mobile number. This is not my mobile number, by the way. So let's click on get OTP. And notice, we get a UI like this with 4 different input fields over here for entering our OTP. So if we go on and enter something, if we let's say press 6, notice it automatically moved on to the next input field. How do we do that? And let's say if we have entered our complete OTP, and if we press backspace, you see it goes back to the previous input field. And this might look simple, but there are a lot of validation and logic that goes on into this. Like for example, if we are on this input field, if you press over here, you see the input cursor goes back to the front, so that if you type something, let's say 2, it has updated it and moved on to the next input field. And you might have seen similar UIs in other popular websites as well, and that is why this is such an important interview question. So let's see how you can go on and implement it into your own website. But before we do that, hit that subscribe button right now if you want to see more such videos like this, because you won't find content like this anywhere else on YouTube. So I've opened VS Code over here, and let's initialize a new React app. So as you can already see, I've created a folder for this OTP login in my VS Code, and inside of it, I'm gonna say npm create wheat at latest. Now wheat is just like create React app. It initializes a new React app for us inside of this OTP login folder. And yep, you see it's asking us the name of the project. If we give this the name, it's gonna create another folder inside this OTP login, but we want our code to be inside of this folder only. So I'm gonna say dot. Now it's gonna ask us the framework. I'm gonna choose React with JavaScript. And yep, you can see we have initialized a new React app over here. Let's get rid of this assets folder. We're not gonna need that. Let's get rid inside of this all the code that's inside of this app.jsx. I'm gonna get rid of this div. Actually, I'll make a div over here and just say hello. Let's get rid of all the styles inside of this index.css, app.css, and cool, we're good to go. And also let's install all of the dependencies. So I'm gonna say npm install, which is going to install all of the dependencies inside of this package.json. And here we go. Our dependencies have installed inside of this node modules folder over here. Let's try to run our app. So npm run dev. And you see it has instantly fired our server off. If we click on this link, our app is opened here with the hello message. Nice. So inside this div, I'm gonna say login with phone. And let's give this div a class name of app, and give this app some styles inside our app.css. Simple styles like font family of sans serif and text align to center. Yep, cool. Now I'm gonna create a component over here called phone OTP login, and this will contain whole of our UI. Also, let's wrap this login with phone inside of an h1, just like that. And obviously this phone OTP login doesn't exist yet, so I'm gonna go on over here and say right click components, and let's get a component over here for our phone login.jsx. Let's initialize a new React component boilerplate. So I'm gonna say RAFCE, press enter, and you see we got a new boilerplate. Phone OTP form. I think it's better if we call it phone OTP form. So yeah, that's better. Let's import it just like that. And if you don't know how I did that RAFCE thing, there's this extension over here called ES7 plus React Redux React Native Snippet. So you can install this extension, and you can also do that. Gets rid of this, and if we go back to our app, yep, you see login with phone and phone OTP form. Our component is created. Now inside of this component, I'm gonna have two things. One is the input field, where we will enter our phone number, and when we have entered our phone number, it will be replaced by the OTP form that we saw in the Disney Plus Hotstar website. Inside this div, I'm gonna have a form component. It's not gonna have any action, but it's gonna have an on submit, which I'm gonna keep empty for now. And inside this form, I'm gonna have an input. Now this input will be of type text. If you want, you can keep it as type number as well, but I'm keeping type text because I'm gonna apply additional validation over here so that we can tell user that if they have entered any alphabet inside of it, that this is not a valid phone number. Value, which is gonna have our phone number. So let's create a state over here, use state, and use state hook inside of our React app is used for managing the state of our app. So this gives us two things. One is a variable. Let's say if I call it phone number, and the second thing is going to be set phone number, which is a setter function which is used for setting or changing the value of this phone number state. And by default, I'm going to keep it to empty. So let's give this value a default value of phone number. Also, we have to import useState from React. And on change, I'm going to call a function called handle phone number, which doesn't exist yet. So let's go on and create it right below this. Const handle phone number. Let's have a placeholder text called enter phone number. Let's see, how does it look like? Okay, this is a simple input field. Nice. And below this, I'm gonna have a button which is gonna be of type submit. So when we press on this button, this on submit will get fired off. So yep, nice. For this on submit, I'm gonna have another function called handle phone submit. Let's just give this over here. Cool then. So first of all, let's handle our state of setting the phone number when we type something inside this input field, because right now if you see, we're not able to type anything even if we type it in our keyboard. So let's take an event over here, and here I'm gonna say set phone number to event dot target dot value. Now if I go on over here and type something, I can type it whatever I like. When I type something and press submit, you're gonna see it refreshes the page. That is, it's doing its default behavior of refreshing the page. So we have to prevent that default variable. So inside this handle phone submit, I'm going to take an event and say event dot prevent default. And now if I type something and press submit, it's not going to do its default behavior of refreshing the page. And over here, I'm going to perform some phone validations. Oops, what am I typing over here? I'm gonna validate if our phone number is legit or not. I mean, phone number format is legit or not. I'm not gonna add a lot of things over here. First of all, I'm just gonna say check if our phone number only contains number and if it's more than 10 digit. So this is just to show you that you can add validations over here. So you can add whatever validations you like. If you want, I can create a completely separate video on form validations and all of these things. So I'm gonna take a regex variable inside of it. I'm gonna say to slash, and inside of the bracket, I'm gonna say this should only contain values from 0 to 9. And now you might be thinking, how am I gonna know how to write this regex? Trust me, you don't. Even the senior developers don't understand what regex is. All we do is we go to Google and type, give me the regex for identifying numbers, and we just copy and paste it, right? So don't hurt your head trying to understand what regex is over here. It's just a form of validation basically. And now below this, I'm gonna say if phone number dot length is less than 10, or if regex dot test, that is if our phone number is not a complete number, that is it has something other than the numbers, right? If any of these conditions satisfy, I'm gonna say alert invalid phone number and return it. Else I will simply say show our OTP field. If our number is valid, then I'm gonna show our OTP field. But before that, we are going to call the backend API just so that we can send the OTP to the user. So if you have any backend API, you can integrate that over here. And after that, if it has been sent successfully, I'm gonna say show OTP field. So let me just create a state over here real quick. Use state show OTP input. By default, it will be false. But if all of this is done, I'm gonna say set show OTP field to true. Great. So, okay, we haven't created our OTP field yet, right? So what I'll simply do, why have I opened this over here? Okay, so what I'll simply do is I'll wrap this whole form over here and I'll say if show OTP input is not true, then just show this, else I'll go down over here, else show this div, which will have the UI of our OTP input. So here simply I'll just add a paragraph first, which will say enter OTP sent to whatever the phone number is. So phone number is inside this phone number state. So okay, let's see. If we go on over here, let's type some random number, click on submit. Yep, you see enter OTP sent to this, and below this I'm gonna have our OTP UI or the OTP input. So for that I'm gonna create a component over here called OTP input. And now this is going to take two things. So I'll try to make this a scalable component. What are all the things that this is going to take? First of all, this should take a length variable. That is, how many input field do we actually need inside of this OTP? Like for example, in the Hotstar website, you saw that there were 4 fields, but in a lot of websites, there are 6 fields or 5 fields. So we can enter 4 over here and this will show those many input fields accordingly. And after this is done, we are also going to submit, right? So I'm going to say on OTP submit. I'm going to have an external function called over here on OTP submit. So this on OTP submit function is what is going to be created over here, which will be taking our actual OTP. And let's just do console log for now. I'm going to say login successful with that OTP. So this component is going to provide us with this on OTP submit function. And obviously this OTP input component is not created over here. So let's go on and create this OTP input component. But before that, if you're preparing for your front-end interview and you would like me to help you in your front-end interview preparation, just click the link in the description down below and book a one-on-one call with me. We're going to discuss tips, tricks. I'm going to give you a lot of resources. I'm going to design a proper roadmap tailored to your situation, which is going to help you out a lot in your front-end interview preparation. So click the link in the description down below and book a one-on-one call with me. So I'm going to go on over here and create a new file, OTP input.jsx. I'll create a new component, RAFCE OTP input, and save this. Let's go back and import this component just like that. Let's see if we go on over here, enter some random phone number, press enter. Yep, you see we get OTP input component right over here. Okay, let's make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so instead of our OTP input, it's going to take two things that we already saw. One is going to be the length, and the other thing is going to be the on OTP submit function. Now let's give them a default value. For example, for length, I'll just say 4 by default, and this is going to be an empty function by default. And first of all, over here, I'll just create a state real quick. So use state, which is going to be used for our OTP, for storing our OTP. So I'll say OTP set OTP. Let's import use state. And by default, I'm going to have the default value of new array of this much length dot fill with 4 empty fields. So let's go on and see. If we do console log and say OTP, let's see what do we get in the console. If we say inspect in the console, oh, we have to enter the phone number, press submit. Yep, you see we get an array with 4 empty spaces, 4 elements with empty value. So this is the place where we will fill our OTP. And over here, I'm gonna create an input field, and actually not one input field, 4 input fields, whatever this length is. So I'll say, I'll take this OTP inside this curly braces, OTP dot map. Let's take the value and index. Inside this, I'm gonna have the input field. So I'm supposed to do return, and inside of it, first of all, let's give this the key. It's going to be our index. Type of this is going to be the text. Value I'll keep as whatever the value is inside the current input. So value, right now it's going to be empty obviously. And I'll have an on change function. What happens when we change it? So let's just keep it empty for now. Or maybe I can just call it const handle change. I'll just use this handle change over here. And I'm going to provide it with an index, that is this index, and the event that we will use to extract the value. So event comes from here, and I'll tell you why I've used this input and event over here in just a second. Let me just write out the other props. One of the other props is going to be on click. So if you remember, I showed you when we clicked on any of these OTP fields, what happened was the cursor moved to the last position. So we're gonna take care of that, and we're gonna take off a couple of more validations. I'll show you. So instead of handle change, this should be called handle click, and this one I'll send just the index. Then there's going to be on key down. Now what will this handle? So basically when we press some key inside this input field, obviously that will put in the value, but over here we will decide if, let's say if I press on backspace, it should go to the previous input field, right? Let's just call it handle key down, and I'll send the index and the event. And then at the last, I'm gonna have a class name of OTP input. Okay, we've created a bunch of functions and I've given it a bunch of props over here. Let's see how we can make it functional. So first of all, let's see how does it look. Okay, it looks very ugly right now. It's just a grid of 4 input fields. We don't want that. Let's go and first style this out. So this OTP input, I'm gonna go to my app.css. I'll say .otp input, and inside this I'm gonna have a width of 40 pixels. Let's just open it on the side so that you can also see. So width 40 pixels and height is going to be 40 pixels. I'm gonna make it a square. Margin of 5 pixels around them. Text align to center, and font size is going to be 1.2 em. And em over here is obviously, as you know, is a relative size. So yeah, you see it looks much better over here. But if we type anything, it's not going to take anything right now because we are not updating our set OTP state, right? So let's go back to our OTP input. And first of all, first thing first that we want to take care of is our user experience. So if you notice, if we refresh this and enter any phone number over here and press submit, you see it didn't focus directly onto this OTP input field. As a user, I don't want to go and click on this input field and then type my OTP, right? I don't want that. What I simply want, it should be already in focus so that if I type, I can log in as soon as possible. So for that, I'm gonna create a useRef hook over here to create a reference to that particular input field. So I'll say const input refs, and this is going to be an array by default because we're gonna have the reference to all of these input fields. That's why I'm making this an array. So how do I do that? So if I go on over here, let's say ref equals, and inside of it, I'm going to take a callback which will say input, and here I'll say input refs dot current of the current index is equal to the input. So what this will do is, let's see, if I just go on over here, instead of this OTP, I'm gonna put input refs here, and let's see the inspect. If I make it full screen, I think that's better. Now if I enter some random phone number, press enter, let's go to the console, and you see we get the object with an array of 4 different input fields. If we hover on them, you can see it's the reference to the first, second, third, and fourth. It provides us the reference to that exact JSX element. Okay, now I'll have a use effect, that is whenever a component is rendered, this use effect will be called, because I'm going to make it empty over here. So simply I'll say if input refs dot current of 0th index, if it has something, then I'll say input refs dot current of 0th index dot focus. Now we're going to focus as soon as we load this component. So let's see. If we refresh this, let's enter some random phone number, press enter. Yep, you see, we already have the focus to the very first input field. So these small things are very important in your interviews and as well as in your day-to-day work as well. So you should pay attention to all of these things. And this comes under part of our front-end system design as well. All of this user interface, user experience stuff. Now let's go on and update our OTP by using set OTP. So inside of this handle change, we're taking 2 things, right? First one is our index, second is our event. So let's take both of these over here. And inside of this, first of all, I'll extract that particular value. So const value equals e dot target.value. And I need to make sure that this whatever I've entered over here is a number and not an alphabet or whatever, right? So I'm going to say if is not a number value. So if value is not a number, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to say return. But if it is a number, I'm going to say const new OTP, and I'll take whatever is already inside of this OTP over here. So let's create a copy, and here simply I'll add a validation to allow only one input, because user can enter more than one inputs over here, right? So I want to say new OTP of index. So whatever the current index is, so that is why I've sent this index, right? So right now our focus is updating only that particular input field. So that's why new OTP of index is equals to value, the value that is inside of that input dot substring, and we're only going to take one, right? So I'm going to say value dot length. So whatever the length of it is, I'll just take the last element, and I'll tell you why I'm doing it over here. So let's suppose we already have some number over here, right? And if you notice inside the hot star, when we clicked on an OTP field, it put the cursor at the very end. It's because when we enter any new number, it can take the very latest number from that input field. So that is what we are also going to do, notice. So okay, we did that. And after this, I'm going to say set OTP to this new OTP. So let's go on and see. If we enter 3K 4 1, so when we press on over here, it should already automatically move on to the end. We're going to add that in just a second. But notice, let's say if we are already over here and we press 5, so it took 5 and got rid of 3, because right now the number was 3 5, and because of this line substring value length -1, value dot length -1, it got rid of 3 and just took the very last, everything starting from value dot length, and after value dot length there is just nothing, right? There's just one character, that is the last character over here. If you want to understand more about this substring and all of this functions in JavaScript, I've created a complete video on strings. So after you're done watching this video, you can go on and watch that video as well. Okay, so after we have entered all of our OTPs, I mean all of the input inside of our OTP, let's say 3, 5 and 1, right? After all of this is done, what I want to do, I want to trigger a function, and that function is going to be this on OTP submit. So over here, I'm going to say submit trigger. I'll add the code for that over here. So I'll say const combined OTP equals new OTP dot join, and I'll join them by the empty string. So some of you might have a question, why are we not using this set OTP or this OTP state? Why are you using this new OTP? It's because this set OTP function over here is asynchronous. Now this is a very important interview question as well, so pay attention. This set OTP or the setter use state action is asynchronous, so we don't have the updated value of this OTP at this point. So if you use that, it's just gonna give you the old value. So it's better to use new OTP. And sometimes a lot of us in interviews and in real world as well make this mistake, and then we scratch our heads why this is not working. So that's the reason why. So you should use this new OTP. If you have any doubts, you can just console log over here new OTP and OTP. You will know that this has not been updated at this point. So okay, we are joining this, and now we have the joined OTP without any array format. So let me show you. If I say log and I say combined OTP, and before that I say new OTP, I'll show you both of these things. So let's just get rid of, let me just get rid of this console log. This is bothering me. If I change this to let's something 4, so you see our new OTP was this and our combined OTP was this, which is what we are going to send to the backend, right, for processing. So simply I'm going to take that on OTP submit function over here. Where did it go? And replace this, and inside this I'm just going to send my combined OTP so that we can receive it over here on OTP submit and show login successful. So I'll again show you. Let's just start from the scratch. So if I enter some phone number, invalid phone number, let's enter more. Yeah, if I say 2 3 3, oh, it's giving us login successful every single time. Why is that? Oh, my bad, I haven't checked the length has to be 4 of this combined OTP. So good thing that we saw this. That is why it's very important to keep, checking if your app is getting built fine. So I'll say combined OTP dot length is equals to the length that is being provided over here. So if that's the case, only then we will do on OTP submit. So all right, let's see. Let's start from the beginning. I'll enter some phone number, submit. If I say 2, 3, 4, 1, and now if I press 7, you see login successful with our OTP, and we can provide the input logic over here with this OTP as well. Cool, then this is done. Now let's discuss the elephant in the room, which is we have to click all of these separately to remove and add as well, right? So we don't want that. What we want, when we click on it, it should move on to the next input field. We don't have to use our cursor to click on it. So okay, as I move to next input, if current field is filled. It's very important to write these comments while you're coding something. It helps upcoming developers as well to understand your code. So it's a good practice. So I'll say if value is there, that is we have something inside of the input field. If value is there and the index is less than length minus 1. So what do I mean by that? That is, we are not in this field right over here. If we are up until here, only then we're going to move forward, right? If we are here, then there's nothing to move forward. So that's what I'm checking. If index is less than length minus 1 and input refs of, dot current of index plus 1. So here I'm simply checking if the current index plus 1 is something up. So this is just giving us error because of this. Yeah. So here simply I'm checking if I have entered something over here, there should be something after it as well, right? So I've added 2 validations, this validation and this validation. So there should be something after it, only then we're going to move forward. Then simply we're going to do input refs dot current and same index plus 1. If we have the reference to that, I'm just going to say focus. That is all. Let's try this out. So if we refresh this again and enter some random number, submit, and now watch the magic. 6, 9, 4, 2. Yeah, you see? It's such a good user experience when you can just enter on an input field and it moves automatically to the next input field. And this is one of the main features of this OTP field over here, that it automatically moves on to the next one. And if we click on backspace, no, it's not moving to the previous one automatically. So we have to handle that one as well. So I'm going to go to handle key down, and it's again taking index and the event inside of it. I'm going to first of all check if event dot key is equals to backspace. So when we press on backspace, it should go to the previous field, right? So first of all, I need to check if it's a backspace key pressed, and the next condition will be I have to check if the OTP of input doesn't exist. So it's empty. So not input, it should be index. That is, we have removed everything from it, and index is more than 0. So if you remember, for this last, we added a validation that if we're on the last, then we're not going to move to the next, right? So if we are over here, we're not going to move to the previous one because there is nothing before it. So that's what we're checking over here. Index has to be more than 0. And same thing, this input refs current plus 1. So do we have the access to the previous one or not? So here we were checking if we have the access to the next one. Here we will check if we have access to the previous DOM element. So I'll simply say index minus 1, and simply inside of it, this is what we are going to do. Just copy and paste it, and simply instead of plus, I'll say minus. Minus. Let's check it out. So let's say if we are here, if we have pressed 3, and let's press backspace again. Yep, we're back to the previous input fields. Let's press again. Awesome. This is working flawlessly. Now, next thing that we have to handle is this. So let's say if we are over here, right? If the cursor is behind this 6, if we press, let's say 2. So right now the input was 2, 6. So it just took the last element, that is 6, right? But we don't want that. We want the very latest input inside of it. So what we simply want to do, when we click on it, this cursor should automatically move to the end, so that when we write, let's say 2, it switched to 2 and got rid of 6. So how will we do that? And let me just add a comment over here. That is, this is moving focus to the previous input field on pressing backspace. Okay, So we're gonna handle this handle click, and this takes an index. That's all, because that is all we need to refer to that particular DOM element. So inside of it, I'm gonna say input refs dot current of this particular index, and what we want to do, we want to move the cursor to the very end. So I'm gonna say dot set selection range. Now what does this do? It basically selects the text from one point to other point. So you can see the offset in text field of the start of the it sets the start and the end position of a selection in a text field. So let's say if I say 0 over here, you're gonna see it's gonna select the complete text. If I click on over here, at least 2 arguments. Okay, it requires 2 arguments. Let's say 0, 1. So if I select this, you see it has selected the complete input box. So we don't want that, right? We don't want to select from 0 to 1. We just want the cursor to start from 1 to 1. So that is, it's going to start from here and end over here. So instead of 0, 1, I'll say 1, 1. So notice, even if I click on over here, it's going to automatically move to the end. Notice? This is such a cool feature, right? And if you found this feature cool, open your Instagram app right now and search Roadside Coder and hit that follow button as hard as you can, because I'm very active on Instagram, and if you have any doubts, any queries, or just a normal message, you can ping me on Instagram for this. So go on, do it. I'm waiting. What? I'm being serious over here. Open your Instagram app right now and follow me there. Oh, you've already done it? Okay, let's move on with this video. Okay, now after this, I'm gonna have a couple of more validations over here, and this is completely optional because a lot of websites don't have this level of validation. Let me show you what I'm going to do over here. So let's say if I have some input field, if I have entered 4 over here, right? If I go on and click on 4, I want it to move it back to this input field, just to remind me that this input field is empty over here. You have to fill it. So I'm gonna add this validation. So I'll say if index is more than 0, the index that we have clicked on, so we are still inside of handle click, index is more than 0 and not OTP input -1, and I'll have to check if the previous one is the empty one. So let's do this. So I'm checking over here. If I clicked on it and if the previous field is empty, then it's gonna move us to the previous field now. Oh, it's OTP, not OPT. Why am I keep writing input over here? It should be index. So okay, if both of these conditions are true, I'll say let input refs dot current, and instead of it, I'm gonna write OTP dot index of the first empty box that it finds. So if this is the first empty box that it finds, it's gonna switch to that, and I'll simply say dot focus. So now if I click on it, it's switching to that one. If I, let's say, remove this, if I click on it, it's switching to the first one, so that we can write over there as well. We can write it in sequence 3, 2, 1, or whatever we like. And over here, I'm giving you one homework. So what you're supposed to do is this. Let's say this is empty, right? And if we are over here, and if we remove this as well, if I have typed 1 now, it shouldn't move to this one. It should jump directly to this input field over here, right? So this is a homework for you, and it is very easy to implement. Trust me. You just have to, use a little bit of your brain cells. If not, you can use something like ChatGPT or something like that. So we have this code. Move to the next field if current field is filled. So I think this is the place where you can make that change. Instead of moving to the next field, you should move on to the next empty field. And yeah, this is how our OTP input field is made. And since you guys have made it to the very end of this video, I have a special announcement for you. I am making a complete front-end interview preparation course with everything: machine coding, JavaScript, React.js, and even some system design as well. So click the link in the description to join my Discord, because that is where I will announce it for the very first time after just a few weeks. And if you like this video and you would like to see more such videos like this, click this card above my head and access the complete playlist.